Past 7 on August 12th, 2013. Let me call the Booth Bay Harbor Selectmen's meeting to order. Thank you. We have a full house tonight, and we have a very full agenda, although a good portion of it will be an executive session, and I'll speak more to that in a few minutes. In way of introductions, we have Kaylee Bigos, our recording secretary, Tom Wooden, the town manager, J.D. Warren, Russ Hoffman, Denise Griffin, Bob Spillane, selectman, and I'm Bill Hamblin. As I said, we have a very full agenda, but there is a good part of the agenda that is under executive session, and specifically, if any of you are here for the sealed bids on the foreclosed town property, if any of those are accepted, that will be in executive session and then discussed after the executive session. And we also have a number of other items in executive session, so I anticipate, regrettably, it will take a fair amount of time. Having said that, let's proceed with the public part of the agenda, and the first item is to approve the minutes of our July 22nd, 2013 meeting.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the minutes of the July 22nd meeting. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed?
I abstain. I wasn't here.
4 to 0. They are approved.
If Russell's in here, can you move?
I read the minutes.
Okay.
I looked at the TV screen. If there's some procedural reason I can't, I'm all ears.
Start over, that's all.
The next order of business is financials, and I'll turn the floor over to Julia Latter, our financial officer.
You have before you the finance sheets. Total revenue year to date, $161,985.15. Total expenses, $593,911.56. Our revenues are on target for this year, this time compared to this time last year. Okay? And our expenses are about 1% off. Does anyone have any questions on the revenue or expenses?
Any questions for Julia? Must be on track.
Yes. And total accounts payable is $374,436.82. And the bank balance is $1,690,635.
So once again, we are tracking very closely our history from prior years,
Yes.
which is good. Anything else for Julia? Julia, thank you. The next item of business is town manager announcements. I'll turn the floor over to Tom.
Thank you. The first order of business is you have before you an application from Andrews Harborside to extend their liquor license, which has already been approved by you and the state, to extend it to the Booth Bay Harbor Shipyard for the Chili and Chowder Competition event, which takes place on September 28th. This is very similar to what the co-op has done through the years for the Bikers Weekend, and I would ask the board to vote to accept this temporary extension for that one day's event.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to extend the Harborside liquor license to encompass the Harborfest Chili Chowder Competition located at the Booth Bay Harbor Shipyard. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you. Just an FYI, Rob Duplessis, the assessor, is going to be here on Friday and also on Monday. We're hoping to submit the taxes at the beginning of next week and get the tax bills out. I will keep you posted on that as we proceed with that. You also have in your mailboxes a letter from the state DOT. Just wanted to make people aware that the Southport Bridge is going to have maintenance done on it on Wednesday, August 21st from 8 to 12. So they will not be opening the bridge for that 4-hour window unless there's an emergency. And if they can't do it on that day, it'll be the next day, the 22nd. Just wanted people to be aware. The sewer district has presented a name to take the spot of Michael Feldman, who was a trustee who resigned June 6th. They have asked us to appoint Henry Tedeschi Jr. to take his place. His term would be ending in 2014. I would ask the board to appoint Henry Tedeschi as the sewer district trustee.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint Henry Tedeschi to the sewer district trustee position vacated by Michael Feldman. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you. As some of you may have heard, I know I have, there have been some complaints of noise across the harbor, some of the amplified music coming from the restaurants and so forth. I've talked to Chief Hosh about this on several occasions, and at this point, they've only received 2 or 3 phone calls this summer, although I hear through the grapevine there have been more episodes. But I would strongly encourage people to contact the police if that is happening so that they can address it. It's very frustrating for the police to hear about it afterwards, because there's not much they can do afterwards. So just as an FYI. And lastly, Officer Rich Mirably has handed in his resignation. Rich has worked here for 13 years, and he will be stepping down as a full-time police officer September 30th, but he would like to stay on as a reserve after that. And I just got this letter today, so Chief Hosh and I have not sat down yet and started to discuss options for backfilling that position. So I just wanted the board to be aware, and to thank Rich Mirably for his 13 years of service. That's
Absolutely.
commendable. So I think that's all I have right now.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
That brings us to public hearings, and I believe there are none tonight.
Right.
Correct?
Correct.
The next item is the first public forum, and I will turn the floor open to the public. And we do have a full slate tonight, so please keep your comments on point, and we will listen to everyone. Sir, please identify yourself and your address.
Alan Carter, Reed Road, and I also co-own a cottage on West Harbor Pond on Walnut Trail. I have a concern. I've spoken briefly to Tom about it earlier, I think last week, I think it was, a couple of times. I spend my mid to late afternoons or early evenings sitting on my dock and catching largemouth bass, and usually catch 2 or 3 every night. However, the water underneath my rump is disappearing. I have a landmark, a rock I'm watching, and we did have a great deal of rain back, I guess it was July, filled the pond up almost to the road. That went down rapidly. I expected that to happen. However, since then, the level on the pond has gone down roughly 3/4 of an inch to an inch a night. And it's creating a situation where the sunlight's getting to the weeds, and the weeds are growing. Practically all of Heron Cove is unswimmable. It's great for bass fishing, but and that McFarland's Cove is full from what I hear. And I guess my concern is, Tom informed me that they checked the mechanism at the dam, and it seemed to be everything is where it's supposed to be. But there's still a mystery as if that's the case, how is it going down? Well, some of it is evaporating, but not like that. If it was that severe, where this pond would be dry in a heat wave.
Yeah.
So my question, I guess, is what's the situation? Is the dam leaking? Is there a group in town perhaps that's dictating the level of the pond? And I believe it is wise for the town, for the Board of Selectmen in the town to monitor this closely. I was just a little tyke back in the 60s, 50s and 60s, when the dam leaked like crazy. When I was little, we swam around pretty much in half salt, half fresh water. I guess the dam has been rebuilt a couple of times over the years, but there either is a problem with the dam, or there's some mechanism that is in place to lower it. And I guess I would, at the risk of sounding confrontational, no one asked me about it. And I do co-own a property on the pond. So I'm wondering if the selectmen would look into this, find out what the scoop is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can, if you're okay, I can tell a little bit of what I know about that.
I could also do some talking.
too.
So go for it.
First of all, the lake is state managed. The dam is owned by the, and managed by the state. So we will need to get them involved at some point. Secondly, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, the state came to us with a plan to put in, basically leave boards to control the level of the pond under the spillway. And we negotiated with them, and that was done. And Jody is the one who actually puts the boards in and takes them out. And I would presume that he is,
Yeah, he has not changed them.
has not changed them. So that would be the first obvious thing, but I think that's not the problem. The dam certainly gets penetrated by salt water, and so I assume there's water movement both ways, but I have no way to know if it's leaking more or less. But I personally, as one of five, I would take the charge to look into this more and see what's going on.
Okay, wonderful, thank you very much.
I would add that about 2 years ago now, the state assisted the town in repairing the siphon, because the siphon had broken. There's a siphon on the pond side that runs about 300 feet into the lake, and when the water level gets high enough, the siphon fills and it starts to siphon water off of the bottom of the pond. That had broken, and in fact we were experiencing high water levels in the pond at that time. But there's a good doctor with a PhD who lives on the lake, I'm sure you know, and he has been actively involved in looking at the quality of the marine biology in the pond. And I'll go and see him tomorrow, and I'll find out what he knows as the beginning. I'll report back to the board and to Tom. But yeah, I hadn't noticed, but I generally keep my eye on it. My son came in a couple days ago. He's got a fishing license, it's all right. And he cast one cast for his 6-year-old son's new rod and caught a smallmouth bass. And he said, wow, there's fish in there. And I said, yeah, well. Anyway, so there are fish in there, but you're right, there's bass in there, and we've got to find out where the water's going.
Okay.
Thank you, Alan.
I don't have anything really to add. I'm one of your neighbors on the pond, and we had a watershed association meeting just 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the same person that Bob is talking about knows very well the condition of the siphon and what's happening there, and I think he'd be the one to shed some light
Yeah,
on
I
it.
think so too.
Yeah, I do.
So we'll do a walk around if I
Right.
think that's the proper thing to do.
Yep. Thanks.
Public forum, anybody else? Going once, going twice. That's the end of the first public forum. Unfinished business. We have one item under unfinished business, and that has to do with the fish pier. There are a number of ongoing questions as we move through the summer and we get the cooler up and running and we get operations up and running. And we had set this meeting to talk about some of those issues. So, care to join us?
The cooler is up and running.
Good.
And partially full of bait. It's working very well. We're still waiting on a couple of pieces from the manufacturer, the strip curtains, some lights, stuff like that. We're getting to the point where we're going to start nagging because we're not getting much response, but I do think they'll come through.
Yeah.
They're components that we're paid for.
Okay.
And we should have them.
Trying to identify the issues, the ones that I might put on the table in no particular order. There is a significant permitting cost, and I think you had raised the question, was that your responsibility or the town's responsibility? And I have an opinion on that, but I'd like to hear from the board. JD?
Yeah, I think it's the town's responsibility for those permits. That's my theory. As I read them, and it has to do with us, so I fully support that we do something with the permits. Either fund them, you know.
Yeah.
I have to say that I would disagree with that point. I think that if the taxpayers are going to pay that money, and I'm a taxpayer, to make a private business operational, I'm sure you would have no objection to us adding it into your rent over the next 20 years.
Another spin on that could be that the town is going to own the buildings. If we were to own the building, then I would see that would be our responsibility. At the end of the lease, who knows what will happen, but we move on, the town moves on, but the permit stays with the building.
Well, I understand your point, but it's a building that would have to, after 20 years, would need substantial maintenance or renovation or whatever, but I am not for paying the fees.
Okay. Anybody else? Denise?
I can see both sides of the argument. I think the big question in my mind now is what other unplanned expenses are we likely to
Or
need
planned
to
expenses.
Or planned expenses are
Yeah.
we likely to incur over the next 3 to 6 months?
To
Or
Yeah.
to frame this discussion, the only other one that I'm aware of right now is restrooms. And if these are to be public restrooms, then there's an argument that they should come out of the cost of the building that Chuck is going to be leased back to Chuck because we're providing public restrooms that all of the taxpayers have access to and use to. Other than that, I'm not aware right now of any, as you say, unplanned or unthought about costs. I'm sure there will be some, one feature of the beast.
And that was one of the questions I posed to Tom's. How are we going to deal with these questions that we don't even know exist yet?
Yeah.
When we come around to updating our lease after the building's up, and then we look, well, where'd all this come from?
Yeah.
Another $20,000.
Yeah.
And 6 months later, it's going to be really hard to identify what was for what.
Well, I think we need to identify these as we go along and get written records
Site
of
work,
what's going on.
where do, the town brings the utilities to the building, where does that stop? And I'm not trying to split hairs, because
Yeah.
I don't think that's gonna benefit any of us. We're trying to do things that make sense for us to do, we're trying to do, tying down the cooler, stuff like that, erecting the cooler
Yeah.
temporarily. We've got significant out-of-pocket expense on that.
Yeah.
We put trim, fascia boards on the outside of the small red building on the end, at our expense. Technically, that would be the town's.
It's a town building, yeah.
That's, as I say, I'm not trying to split hairs. On the permits, I've got a little bit of a sore spot on those anyways, because initially, Jeff was gonna take those on. And 2 months later, all of a sudden, he's not doing them. Which has nothing to do with this conversation, but
Yeah.
it's still a factor.
Yeah.
What is the estimate of the cost of the public restrooms?
We haven't gotten there yet.
We haven't discussed it.
The restrooms in this building, I was not intending to be public.
I think when we talked about it during our initial discussions, we talked about the possibility of maybe adding some onto the back, or we talked about the ones in the building being for the building, they weren't to be public, but possibly at the end on the roadside.
All right, I will then apologize for misinterpreting what you had said. When we talked about public restrooms, I thought the discussion was having those as public, not additional ones that would be public.
It wouldn't be out of the question to make them public, but we need to plan now
Yes.
for that, because, they're certainly geared towards our uses. I mean, a shower in one of them for dive gear storage
Yeah.
and whatnot, stuff like that, that's job specific. That doesn't need to be in a public,
Right.
shouldn't be in a public bathroom.
Right.
Well, if you build them for the public, they'll get on the app. you know, there is an application to find out where they are. I say that in somewhat of a jest, but it's true. The thing is, I think that's the subject of another conversation, it seems, because certainly you have to have restrooms as an employer.
Right.
And you have to consider, if we have to consider, and probably you have to consider, making those available for, under the American Disabilities Act as well.
But they are on the plans.
They are, right.
We have a handicap ramp leading up to both the office and the bathrooms. The office and the bathrooms are on a raised floor above the height of the pier for FEMA standards.
And I think since this is ultimately a public project, I think I would go along with the idea that that particular part of town does need public access to a restroom, and I would go along with that. I mean, assuming the price was right.
Assuming the price is right,
I
yeah.
think that that's an important consideration.
Yeah.
So was that not in the original plan to
Well,
have restrooms open?
apparently, that hasn't been firmed up,
Sounds-
so I think we ought to firm it up.
It was tossed back and forth,
Yeah.
and my understanding that the last conversation was, let's not open that can of worms.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, this is the point where we should be.
Should be talking about
Right.
it. Yeah.
Right.
And I
I
think
think
that's what we're trying to do.
I think that's the subject of another meeting, so that
Yeah.
we can look at the cost and say the taxpayers are willing to do this or they're not willing to do this. So, yeah, I'm done.
Okay, returning to the permitting costs, I guess my personal feeling is that because it is going to be a town building, that the town should do the permitting. That doesn't necessarily preclude taking that cost and folding it back into the lease cost. It saves your out-of-pocket, your cash flow issues. But it would deduct the amount of money from the budget that we have for the building. And since it's a legitimate cost of putting up the building, I guess that's sort of where I'm leading to at this point in time. That is, the town should write the check for it, but it will be part of the cost of putting up the building. But I'm not locked into that position. I'm willing to hear any and all arguments.
I am.
All right.
The permits are gonna be there regardless of who leases, whatever happens to
Right.
the
Right.
property.
Right. As the building is.
Right.
So I see it as a cost of putting up a building. I don't see it as a separate issue.
I believe the same thing you do, Bill. You know, it is a public building, and
Yeah,
we need to finance the permits.
yeah.
And it doesn't, you know, if you want to put it into the rent or whatever,
Yeah.
the lease, then we have to do that. We'll have to discuss that, but I think basically,
There are a lot of these costs that could be construed as being part of putting up the building, bringing the utilities to the building.
Well, but we
Could be
said,
construed as-
we talked about that, and we said we would take the utilities to the building outside of the cost of the building. That's something we had a conversation about
Right,
and
and
agreed
it's
to.
specifically mentioned in the lease,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
yes.
So
Yeah, that's
you're
already
covered
covered.
on that issue. And if there are others, you're right, we should identify them.
You know, retaining wall, back retaining wall, I mean, if that has to get dug down deeper, yes, the
No.
building's gonna be sitting on it, but it's holding the parking lot back.
Yeah, I would put that firmly in the town's camp, not in the cost of the building camp. But that's just me. Are we ready to move ahead on this, or do we want to
move ahead.
I need a motion?
Oh, what is the amount that we're talking about?
1,500? Is that?
Yes,
15
that
to
sounds
2,000,
like what I-
depending on, I mean, she has an hourly
Yes.
rate as well, so if you're talking
Yeah.
anywhere in
Two-ish
that
grand.
range.
Yeah.
15,
It's not a huge amount of money over 20 years.
No.
not really.
I move that the town pay the $1,500 or $2,000, between $1,500 and $2,000 for permits, and it's folded back into the ultimate rent on the
Can
building.
I add something for you to that? Is there any more permits that we need to know about? That
town-
concerns me right now. Are we there?
Well, there'll be a building permit, I would assume,
Yeah.
and I don't know what's
Yeah.
involved in that.
Tom?
I mean,
There'll probably be
I
building
just-
permits and.
You're gonna have to deal with them
It's gonna
as they
be-
come up if there are
Okay.
other things, but I mean, yeah, I don't foresee too much more than
Okay.
the building permit.
Building plumbing, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I second Bob's motion. That's on the floor, right?
It's been moved and seconded that the town pay for the cost of the permits between $1,500 and $2,000, and that cost be folded back into the cost of erecting the building and go into the lease. Any further discussion?
So a question in connection with that then.
Question.
Does that change the amount that the folders are paying to the, as a
I would
lease
argue,
amount?
he can have his own answer to this, but I would argue that it does not. What it does is reallocate some of the budget. In other words, we have a pool of money set aside for this project.
Right.
And I would be shocked if we don't spend every dime that's in that pool.
Sure.
So now the question is, what are you gonna spend it on? If we don't spend it on permits, we'd spend it on something else, I'm sure. So we're really allocating among that budget. That's my interpretation.
Can I just say, I know, Bob, you were talking about when the lease is done, and the building needs repairs, and if it's not us there, the building itself won't need a new permit to do any repairs, you're sitting in the same footprint. It's only now because,
Yep.
you probably know that,
Right.
because that shouldn't change anything, even if we're not there, when the next person comes in.
I agree with that statement. I'm not
Yeah.
sure whether it argues for or against the
Well,
motion.
no, but I think Bob thought that,
Not really. I
No,
understood what you
okay.
were saying. I
Yeah,
understand
yeah.
what you're saying.
Any further questions or discussion on this motion? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous.
So can I follow up on that a little bit further?
Yes.
How will I be able to track what is being allocated to our lease?
I think the town owes you a reporting on.
Document.
a
We have,
monthly basis.
we have it accounted for separately from anything municipal.
Will that,
So-
will we have to request that as we go, or will be, one, more particularly once we get into the meat of this, you know, once we get into the construction phase, I'd like to be able to monitor that pretty
Oh, absolutely.
closely, so,
Sure.
because if there's something being done that's gonna get attributed to us,
You bet.
I'd like to have some
Yeah.
input into whether that,
Yeah,
Okay.
and it is my model that you will have, you should have input on that, and you will have input on that.
So, Tom, you'll keep records of
Oh,
it.
yeah. We are already, yeah.
Okay, so for now, maybe once a month, when things heat up every 2 weeks, or,
I would hope we'd be meeting at least every 2 weeks,
Yeah.
or some of us,
Yeah.
for those discussions
Right.
specifically.
It's fine, yeah, no problem.
We've touched on restrooms, and I'm not sure what to do about that at this point in time. I also think the town should have public restrooms there. Would it be feasible, and this just occurred to me during discussion, and briefly looking through your plans, right now, there are 2 restrooms, a woman's and a men's, and the men's appears to have the shower.
Yes.
Would it be feasible to, rather than having a men's and a woman's, to have a Fuller Marine restroom that is yours and private and your business's, and a single public restroom, unisex restroom?
Yes, it would, but we need to plan for it.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, it's certainly doable, there's enough space in there.
I would
we
think
could
that would
provide
make
some
more
public
sense,
restrooms.
you know, it's,
You know, but then the question comes, you know, you've gone around with the restrooms in the harbor, cleaning issues and et cetera, et cetera.
my model is the town would maintain and clean that restroom.
I'm all for it, it'll relieve pressure on our restrooms.
Right.
There's gonna be-
Right, and that
Sure.
separates them, so you don't have to be cleaning or
Right.
dealing with public restrooms. And I think a single restroom that's available to the public ought to work just fine. People can figure out who's inside.
Yeah.
Well, there's a need there. It's a
Yeah.
public facility as well as a business facility.
Are you saying just a single toilet, or are you saying a men's and ladies
No, I'm,
public?
well, no, I was saying a single restroom that simply said restroom on it, that was available to the public, and whether it had 1 or 2 appliances in it, I don't care. And the way
Basically,
you've laid this out right now, I would make the one with a shower yours, and perhaps consider a separate entrance, and then have the one that's currently labeled women's to be the public one.
Right. I'm not sure.
Yours is gonna be-
We've got the one wheelchair ramp. so
Right.
Right.
It doesn't make
Yeah.
sense to build a second handicap accessible
No.
ramp.
No, but you
and
could-
how do we access that? Maybe we access ours right off the office.
Yeah, you put a door in from the office. You can still have this door, just keep it, locked and then a door in from the office and that way.
I mean, there's a way to do it.
Yeah.
You know, there's no
Yeah.
question.
Is the board in favor of that philosophically?
Philosophically, I think it's, I think we're building a dual-use facility.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the whole idea of the public fish pier, and we want people to be able to use it. And I think it would be wrong to redo this place and make it look orderly and proper without providing a public restroom.
Yeah.
So I'm for a public access to a restroom.
And I'm
Providing it doesn't cost an arm and a leg.
Right.
You know, because talk about pressure, there's a lot of pressure involved in the toilet business, we know that.
So I am as well, but I guess I reserve some time to think about what we really would need there in terms of facilities. And do we need a motion to do that, or do we meet with you guys separately, or?
I guess what I was hoping for is that we would, and that's why I said philosophically, we agree with the concept.
Right.
And then I would turn it over to you to implement that concept in some fashion and come back with a modified plan.
I could connect with Jody and Tom
Yeah,
and
yeah.
discuss some options on how
Yeah,
they might see it happening. Jody does not have a set of these most recent plans. That perhaps we could get that spare set to him.
okay.
But connect with the three of us and maybe have a session to see what might work.
Okay.
Philosophical arguments
So-
have a price, you know,
I know, I'm
so
gonna get
that's
to that.
that's the
I'm
point.
gonna get to that.
Yeah, okay.
But philosophically, yes, I
Okay.
think it's a good idea.
You know,
Yeah.
it might also be a good idea, rather than just the three of us, to have a workshop and go through all these, because none of us have had a chance to look at these.
Yeah,
Let's
I'm
do
thinking
this.
we still need yet another workshop, and probably should be a separate meeting rather than try and do it at a selectmen's
Absolutely,
meeting.
because we should start talking about materials and getting it out,
Yeah.
get it going.
There's a lot to
A
do.
lot of details that you guys are gonna have to have
Yeah.
input into it.
Right.
And we're nearing that point,
Yeah,
so.
okay.
We're
and-
hoping to bid documents by Labor Day, so.
Okay, so I think it is clear that you have a clear charter to go ahead and try and think about how to do this and make one of them a public and one of them your own. And we should be thinking about the cost issues and how we might do that, since it's gonna be integrated with a building. Maybe there's a square footage allowance that comes out of your costs and goes directly to the town. That would be the only way I could, quickly off the top of my head, there may be others. But why don't we address that at the workshop? Is that?
Sure.
Sure.
It's
that fair?
more
Yeah, that's
expensive
fair.
square footage than a lot of it.
It is, and if there's a premium
We'll
on
have
it,
to calculate
then
that separately.
that's fine. I don't have a problem with that.
You want me to propose something for maybe next week?
Yes, yeah.
All right, all right.
Paper flush.
What's
I
that?
think
I
of-
said it should be a paper flush.
Wow. I think years ago, somebody called it, one of the costs, the flushometer.
The flushometer, yeah, we had one, didn't we? On one of the
A
public
while back.
toilets, yeah. Yeah.
downtown.
The last thing we should probably address while the Fullers are here are the noise issues.
Well, we're in the hot seat.
Right. I think you've all seen the letter he handed out, and we have all seen emails on issues of noise. I did do some research just on our ordinances, and I don't see anything in our ordinance that precludes what you are doing. So I think it's an issue of simply trying to be good neighbors. And also, for me, recognition of the fact that this is a temporary situation that we hope to resolve in the next few months.
It looks like some of it's already been resolved, like just reading this.
Well, the cooler by the road is gone.
Yeah.
So that
was the big one.
the daily removal of bait
Okay.
at 3 AM is gone.
That was the big one.
Tonight, there's a truck coming at 2 o'clock. great timing. But it's not often. I mean, very seldom does that happen. And Ms. Pickett has been there 50 times if she's been there twice. I mean, she walks up behind the forklift, she, does things that are just unsafe, and that's exactly why those alarms are on there.
Yep.
Tom, OSHA doesn't require them, but boys, they put them on for a reason. And
Oh, I
when that
agree.
goes off,
Yeah.
it gets
I-
the person's attention.
I don't think anyone here is gonna argue with
Yeah.
leaving
No,
that
I agree,
alarm
yeah.
on.
I was just suggesting maybe back that truck down the ramp that's there rather than by the street.
Because the cooler is on that ramp, because that's the only place we could put it. If that cooler completely occupies the flat section of the new deck, and the new deck is the only place that a heavy truck can go.
Okay, all right.
Oh, right.
Yep, that's true.
It's the weight limit issue.
Until the
Yeah,
other building gets.
yeah.
And actually Jody was gonna put some gravel in that area at the top of the ramp, and I suggested that he don't.
To catch that, yeah.
It funnels water
Yeah.
other than right into the cooler, and it prevents people from driving down,
Yeah.
coming too close. We are going to do anything we can to minimize the noise, and perhaps this night we will disable the alarm, have the person standing by to do it. But we're really trying to, we have a safety mentality over there.
Sure.
Trying to instill that in the crew.
Absolutely.
And for us to say, you gotta work safe, you gotta be careful, you gotta wear neon work vests when you're directing traffic, this and that, and then pull the alarm out of the forklift is kind of contradictory.
I guess I would just charge Tom to continually monitor the situation and let the selectmen know.
Oh, it'll be brought to my
As we
attention almost
proceed.
daily,
If
yeah.
anyone has any other suggestions.
It is ours.
No, not really. It's a temporary thing. I'm reasonably confident that
When you
there's
say
some other
seldom,
issues.
what does seldom mean?
There maybe have been two or three trucks.
2 a.m.?
Yeah,
I don't even know if
really,
that
not
many.
even that many, I don't think.
In the last
90%
month?
of the deliveries are during the day. Usually the boats get in the morning.
Right.
As soon as the boats get in, the bait is loaded onto trucks and sent to us. And it's critical that we get that bait packed immediately while it's still cold. As soon as it starts to warm up, it spoils.
I would think that your proposal, your suggestion to disable the alarm and put somebody on watch behind the forklift would be a reasonable thing to do.
For the late night.
For the
delivery.
2
2
a.m.
a.m.
2 a.m.
Yeah.
stuff, yeah.
And as I said in the letter, other abutters, that come over, people at Cat and Fishes, guests of hers come down, they, wonder what's going on, and Robbie's asking, if you making noise, we're bothering you at night? Nobody has said that we are. It's basically one person.
I didn't have anything else for the fish pier.
Nope.
So our action item is to schedule a workshop next week or shortly thereafter.
There's the on-site with the DEP.
Thursday?
Pre-app, Thursday.
Yep.
Over there.
Yep.
Do we need to be there?
You don't need to be, but we'd love to have you if people have time.
What time Thursday?
I
10.
forget. It's 10, isn't it?
10.
Yeah. The more participation, the better, I think.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thanks, John.
That's the end of unfinished business for tonight. Under new business, we have rules for public forums. This is an issue that was raised at the last meeting. My understanding of the history is for as far back as people can remember, the Selectmen's meeting always had one session of public speaking and forum and involvement. And about a year ago, a suggestion was made to move that to 2 sessions, one early on and one later on. And that was done, and we've been doing that for about a year. And there has been some feeling among the selectmen that this has not been as efficient or as focused as it perhaps should be, and want to entertain ways to do this better. And that's what this topic is. I did some preliminary research on this issue, and I'm happy to talk to that, but I should let others speak first.
Well, as I've said before, I think historically in Booth Bay Harbor, there has been always a public session or always an allowed public input, but generally limited to the question at hand. And I am all for adding things to the next meeting's agenda, as some towns do. I think that's the proper way to do it. It gives the board a chance to discuss the matter, to consider it, and then come back to that person who asked the question 2 weeks later or at the next meeting, whatever the case may be. And I see a lot of towns have, according to your research, have done it that way. My major concern is that there is business to be done, as you see tonight. There's questions that people raise about the dam, for example, and the damage that might be happening to that and to the life of the pond. There are questions that need to be dealt with by the board. And to take 2 hours or an hour and a half to receive multiple questions from the floor, out of the blue, so to speak, I think takes up the people's time. The people that elected us expect us to do the town's business. And so I'm all for a change. And personally, I like the idea of people being able to ask about an item that's being discussed, is to come to Mr. Chairman and say,
Yep.
I have some input on that item. And fine, if you want to add another item, we'll ask the town manager to put it on the agenda for the next meeting. That's my view.
Okay.
I'd like to address that as well. I think that anybody that takes the trouble to come to this meeting, whether they be a select person or an audience person, if they've come with something to say, something on their mind, they should be allowed to speak. Having said that, as Bob just said, the Board of Select Persons has some priority items that we need to deal with and need to be dealt with at this meeting. This is our only opportunity to do that. At the last meeting, I think what I heard from the recording, since I wasn't here, I think I heard our chairman say that he feels that he needs some guidelines on how to manage public forums. So I don't know that we're ready for a motion yet, but perhaps when we are, I would say that we should draft a guideline for public forums. That guideline should be fair to both the audience, the people of the town, as well as to the Board of Selectmen. It should recognize the need for the town to interact with the board, and it should foster some mutual respect between the board and the people of the town. And then the second part of that motion, maybe it's even the third part, would be to do some research. And Bill, I saw your email earlier that you've already done. Contacting surrounding towns was one of my suggestions. Find out what the practice was in the past was another of my suggestions. And take into consideration the guidelines and policies that you find there in developing our own guideline. So I guess I'd suggest that we do come up with a draft, perhaps for the next meeting, of a guideline that would help you manage
Right.
our public forum.
AD?
I kind of agree with Russ there, but I still think it's up, everyone out here is taxpayers. And I think they have a right, and we can control it. We can control it as a board. And I looked at the regulations, and really, it's up to us how we control it. And, if somebody has a statement or has something to say to us, we need to know, because you are the taxpayers. You are the people that put us here to run these meetings.
And that's how I feel about it. And really, if somebody, yeah, we have an agenda, correct. But we're out here at 8 o'clock, so I mean, if you have something to say as a taxpayer, I think it's our obligation to listen to the taxpayers. That's my theory of that. We can go through all these regulations and formulate all we want. But the fact is, those people sitting right out there are taxpayer, people that put us in office. And this is America. And America speaks out. And I believe in an American way of doing things. And I believe that anyone in this room should be able to speak to us within reason. And we need to control the meetings and the people that speak within reason. And I think it's gotten out of hand here a couple of weeks ago when I really believe, and a lot of people's called me about this situation, about can we speak at a meeting, or we can't speak at a meeting. I think you have a right to speak at this meeting. All you gotta do is, Mr. Chairman, we'll go by the parliamentary procedures, and I think we can do that. But like you say, I agree with Russ, we formulate some kind of a order of how to do this. And that's about all I'm gonna say, but you other taxpayers out there, you need to, and I don't wanna hurt the participation. And that's all I gotta say about that. That's it.
Thank you. Denise, yay, nay?
I think one public forum is great. I think what worked really well in previous years is when people speak, they have a limited time period to speak. It's to come to bring up an issue to the selectmen. If it's an issue, in my opinion, that requires a huge amount of debate, I think that issue should be put on the following meeting's agenda.
Yeah.
That's, my concern in some of the meetings that I've been to is that we had a lot of work that needed to get done that didn't need to get done because there was a little bit too much debate going on issues that we didn't have enough information and data on at the point in time. And in retrospect, it was kind of a waste of time.
Yeah.
So.
As people have said, I did get a chance to do a little bit of research, and let me report that to all of you. I found data on 11 towns, and in terms of agendas only, one had 2 public sessions on their agenda, and that was Searsport. 2 of them had 1 public session on their agenda, and that was Poland and Paris. And 8 had no public sessions on their agenda, and that was Goldsboro, Bethel, Sedgwick, Smithfield, Winterport, Mount Desert, Woolwich, and Waterboro. This is not to say that these last 8 towns did not have a mechanism to allow the public to speak. Most towns had rules that they allowed the public to address the chair at some point during each agenda item that was discussed. So in other words, as you went down through the agenda, there would be a point where the chair would say, okay, I've heard the motion. It would turn and say, are there any questions from the select board on this? And there would be a clarification section. And then the chair would open the floor to the public and say, do you have any comments on this motion or this agenda item? Perfect. And then he would, at some point, declare that part to be closed, and then it would go back to the select board to debate and vote, and that would be it. Now that addresses things that are on the agenda, and the discussion would be limited only to those immediate agenda items. So the obvious question is, what do you do about new topics? Most of the towns said for new topics that are not on the agenda, they were either handled by the public requesting ahead of time that the town manager or one of the selectmen basically sponsor an agenda item to get it on the agenda. Or they could raise it during the meeting, during the equivalent of a public forum, and I'll read you one example that's actually a little humorous in a minute. And it would be put on the agenda for the next meeting to give the board time to research and study, because believe it or not, we really do research and study all these things. And I have written rules for this type of procedure from 4 towns, Woolwich, Poland, Smithfield, and Waterboro. And I can read you the Woolwich one since it's fairly short. and it's in their rules and regulations. And it says, "Public to address board. As each item on the agenda for any meeting is brought to the floor for discussion, the sponsor of the item, or if there is no board sponsor, the administrative assistant, or I assume the town manager, shall first be allowed to present the initial comments for consideration by the public and the other board members. Following this introduction, there will be time devoted for any questions of the sponsor or the administrative assistant or the town manager regarding the agenda item, which any board member, again, that would be limited to boards, may have to help clarify the question presented as the agenda item. The chairman shall allow questions only during this time. No debate or discussion of collateral issues shall be permitted. Once the agenda item has been explained, so it's clear to everybody, what is it saying? Once the, sorry, the print is very small. Explained by the sponsor or the administrative assistant by the questioning provided above. There will be time devoted for any resident, taxpayer, or authorized representative of an organization to address the board regarding this particular agenda item. So that would be the public interaction. And any comment by the public shall be limited to expressions of opinions or concerns regarding the agenda item. No public comment shall be allowed which has the effect of embarrassing or attacking the character of any individual or board member. And then after listening to any input from the public, the chairman will close the public comment on the issue and then provide for debate and vote of the issue by the board. And that is essentially word for word what they have. And it's very similar to those other 4 towns that I mentioned. And that would be the model that I would go to. If we follow Russ's agenda, we can table this for tonight, and I will distribute those words or ones similar to all of us, and then we can act on it at the next meeting, or we can act on it tonight if you feel confident enough to move ahead.
I'm not ready to act on it.
All right.
I want to see that, thank you
Yes.
very much.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure I agree with all that, but
Okay.
I need to
I gotta
think
review
about it.
Sure.
I gotta review it.
Sure. I will forward you Woolwich's. I will forward you Waterborough's, which says the same thing, but says it over many more paragraphs. But it's essentially the identical wording.
I do appreciate that you did all the research on that.
Yeah, that's great.
I do too. Thank you, Bill.
So I would hear a motion to table this for tonight.
So moved.
So,
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to table this. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Seeing,
may I?
we're going to get to public forum right after this.
Oh, this isn't, all right, okay, I'm sorry, I'm out of place.
We're still under the old rules.
Okay.
We're not to the new rules yet.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? That concludes new business. We are now to the second public forum, and Frank has had his hand up even longer, so. Frank.
Frank Bassett, Booth Bay Harbor. First thing I want to address is the cause here. Initially, the reason that I brought up the 2 public hearings, suggestions for it, was the timing of your public hearing at these meetings was prior to anything you guys discussed. So we would sit here, we would go through the introduction, pledge of allegiance introduction, approval of minutes, financial town manager announcements, and then we'd have a public hearing. We would have our public forum. The agenda isn't good enough to tell us what you're going to talk about specifically, like other ones I read. And so if we couldn't read your mind and know what you were going to talk about, there was no way for us to comment. So the suggestion was have one at the beginning for people like this nice gentleman here who has specifically had something to speak about, and then he could go home and be done with it. That's why we had that first one, to get the people out of here, so that they could go home and go about their day. The second was so that we could comment on what you discussed. It is our town, you're not lords. We're all part of this, okay? That was my feeling on it. So that was the cause of the request for two public hearings, or not public hearings, public comment. If you want to go to you didn't mention Booth Bay, by the way. Booth Bay does have 2 public comment sections also, and they do allow comment after every, like you were speaking, like Woolwich does. So there's another town that does it a little differently. If you did it that way, then you could, we wouldn't need the 2, but we needed the second one so that we could talk about what you were talking about if we had comment, and as you know, generally I did. The second thing is, this last meeting that we're talking about, the meeting that Mr. Splain was talking about that went so long and that really spurred all of this, I mean, frankly, were we surprised? I learned more at that meeting than any meeting I've been to. I learned about tennis courts, I learned about footbridges. I mean, I thought that was a very constructive, informative meeting. Mr. Splain, you seem to be happy that you said that you were glad it didn't get recorded because nobody had to watch it. And that was a slap. You know,
Let's stick to the point of what's in front of us.
That's a rather
the
personal
point
remark.
is that meeting went long, and you also had a very long executive session in there, included in those minutes also. So, you know, it wasn't like we were dragging it out till 9 o'clock and then you went into executive session. So, I mean, I'm sorry that others didn't enjoy that meeting as much as I did. I thought it was very productive, and I learned a lot from the comments that all of us made and the comments that you made. So, I guess we have a different opinion on that.
My takeaway, Frank, is that you explained why the rationale for the two segments, but you also feel that what I talked about tonight would address your principal concerns.
Absolutely. I think it would be great if you comment as it went along. And I also would like to receive, if you can, give me a copy of, email me a copy of the proposal that you're going to put forward.
Sure.
I'd love to see it. It sounds great. So, I mean, I don't know, what do you guys think? Does it sound good?
Frank, it's not for you to ask them.
Oh, can you ask them?
I will.
Okay, I'll sit down if you do.
Anybody else in public forum? Dorothy?
I agree. I think what you proposed, and Russ, I think those statements were very good. I think we should encourage public participation. I've lived here a number of years and haven't participated. This is very encouraging to understand it and become a part of it, because I think we all owe it to ourselves and to the town to keep better informed, and I think this would be helpful. I concur with what you said.
Thank you. Anybody
And I look
else?
forward to seeing it in writing.
Sir?
I think Jay made a valid point. I think the chairman and the board can control it a little better, possibly, so it doesn't go on
Yep.
and on and on. If a point comes up and it looks like it's gonna be running into a long time, just kick it down the road to the next meeting. That's the way I feel about it.
Thank you.
Alan, back to Alan.
Oh,
Get
I'm
Alan.
sorry, yeah, Alan's,
I would just like to see it kept as simple as possible. I think all you need is a strong but fair chairman and a little decorum from the audience. And I don't know if you need a lot of written this is the way someone else does it, so on and so forth. I'm not raining on your research, but keep it simple. I think it can be done.
I personally find it hard to turn people off, and I would like to have the written word that says you need to stick to this topic.
Yeah.
So I have some confidence when I do that it will be fair.
Okay, but generally, I think it can be controlled very easily. Thank you very much.
Robert Field, I live Barter Road. We have family storage on Edwards Jewelry in Design in town. And I've heard, I think you've talked about it in the past 4, 5, 6 months or not, but wanted to talk about parking in town. Can't be done tonight, but another time. I think I have some ideas that would probably help this town out greatly.
Excellent.
Good. We gotta wait to hear them?
I mean, I don't know if you have time. I mean, I don't want to get you all out of sorts.
We are pressed for time tonight, and I appreciate your offer to, we'll put it on the agenda for a future meeting and talk about it.
Just let me know when that meeting
Well,
is.
just give Tom a buzz, and he'll put you on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'd like to, Elbridge Giles, Lakeview Road, West Buffet Harbor. I'd like to ask the board, what is your ideal time to be going out the door?
Anyone care to answer that?
When we've completed the work of the people of the town, and we generally stay until it's all done, until we've been through the whole agenda, and I don't see any reason to change now.
Blake? Oh, I'm sorry. Russ?
Good. I think that the meeting should have an ending time. I think that the agenda should be managed so that time is allocated to deal with the issues that we can, or the prior, I mean, that very topic is one that I think should be addressed in our guideline. We ought to be able to leave by 9 o'clock, Mr. Giles, I think. So I think it's a sort of a courtesy to the board and a courtesy to all of you that the meeting have a start time and an ending time.
Link.
Like example, 84 Oak Street, Woodbury, I've made. To address that comment, there wasn't any end time when I was a selectman. And I sat in this room and listened to some of the most inane conversations I've ever heard in my life. And I sat right there and I listened to them because people had something to say. And stuff I couldn't do anything about, didn't have the power of it to do it. But I listened to it because they wanted their say.
Sure.
That's what the people of this town want, they want their say. That's why there's always been a public forum. You can have your rules about the public having a comment section for each agenda item. I think that's a great idea. I've always been bothered by that. But at the end of the meeting, somebody ought to be able to stand up and say, I've got something to say.
Yeah, nothing
In
I
2009,
suggested precluded that.
I gave the town that picture as a reminder of the freedom of speech. That's what we're talking about here tonight. If you want public forum, have it like it is, unfettered. If you don't, I want to vote and I want to know who doesn't.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mike?
Mike Tomko, 59 Rose End. I will just mention that with my experience working with the Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission and the work that I've done for the walkability workshop, that grant opportunities and other program opportunities that the town can apply for are quite often judged, built upon the amount of robust public engagement and transparency. And I would encourage every effort to engage the public as much as we can. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Well,
Well,
that's,
wait a minute.
the response.
George hasn't gone yet, so why
Oh,
don't you
we're
go?
done.
All right.
He's off the hook. In regards to what Russ said about ending a meeting at one particular time, I'd be opposed. I think there again, the board and the chairman can kind of control the meeting. And I think you guys could prevent it from going on and on. And I think that would work. Unless there's a football game at 9.
George?
Hey, Bill, you know, George Franklin Harbor, listen, I don't, we're fixing something that's not broken. You know, a year or so ago, there was a lot of heated discussions between other tenants that the town ran into, and the meetings got really animated on both sides of the fence. But you guys said, you know what, we're just gonna do this different, everybody's gonna be civil, we're gonna be nice, and since then, that's happened. And I don't recall, and I come to a lot of these meetings, I missed the one last week when they railed against this so-called long-winded public forum business. But really, I think since we had that discussion with the former selectmen about folks being nice and friendly, it's been that way. And to add more rules, to add a stop time, to me, is limiting what Link said as our freedom of speech. We live in a small town. Government is closing in all around us. And this is the only piece that we get to hang on to and act publicly at the drop of a pin, if need be. And to take that away, or even try to chisel some of that away from us, I think is being unfair. And frankly, Bill, sometimes long meetings, you know, that goes with the territory. That's what you guys signed up for. Nobody is forcing you to be a select person.
Somehow this has morphed into a conversation about long meetings because of Mr. Giles' question. No one up here has proposed putting a stop time on the meeting. What you heard was two individual answers to that question. And as to my personal viewpoint on the rules of public forum, I think what we've talked about tonight would be a tremendous improvement on what we have been doing, because it allowed people to speak to specifically the topics that the selectmen are voting on, and there still would be a chance for new agenda items and stuff out of the woodwork. So I think it would be improvement.
Right.
So it may not be broken, but I think this would be a step forward.
You know, it wasn't long ago, we were talking about access to the agenda and the town having a Facebook page so people could interact, and it seemed like we had to argue and fight with the town select board to get that approved, and they finally did. Frank talks about the agenda, twice monthly. And, it's, our feeling on this side of the fence, and our job is no less important than your job, as citizens out here questioning what goes on in town. We're no less important than you guys on the other side of the fence, and we too give up time, from our busy family lives. But it seems to me that the town, it's been hard for us as citizens to get information from you, and we want to share that and to be open. And that's all we're asking for, is to be open, be forthcoming, and, put it all out there, what do we got to hide?
I understand that may be your perception, but I can assure you, no one up here is trying to hide information. There has never been that mindset that I've been able to detect at all. We may not know what's coming down the pike, but it's not because we're hiding it from you.
I didn't have the luxury that Russ did to get the tape and listen to it over again, and I should have, that's my fault. But I didn't get the same takeaway from that last meeting that Russ may have gotten from it. So, of course, everybody hears things differently, but
Yeah.
certainly, I was quite disappointed, to be frank. I didn't think anything was broken. I was dumbfounded. I didn't know where was the problem.
But again, my personal view, it's an improvement. Anybody else, public forum?
Actually, I have a question. There used to be a part on the agenda that said Pledge of Allegiance. Where'd that go?
I have no idea. We pledge allegiance, as you saw tonight.
I'm sorry, I wasn't here for the opening of the meeting, but when I watched it on Channel 7 once and you didn't.
Yeah, we did. There was an edit that removed it, because I saw your comment. And
I can't speak for the editing of the tape.
I know, but I went back and
Neither can we.
looked, because I said,
I just want to make sure Pledge of Allegiance being said at Booth Bay Harbor Selectmen.
each and every meeting.
It wasn't being, sorry.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice. That brings us to executive session under MRSA, Section 405-6C, to discuss real property, Section 405-6E, to consult with legal counsel, and Section 405-6A, to discuss personnel matters. I would ask you to, unless you are participating in those executive sessions, to clear the room. Thank you. We're out of executive session at 9:22 by the clock on the wall.
We're all still alive.
We're all still here.
I don't know, we got eaten alive by bugs, so.
Oh, really? Oh, dear.
During the executive session, we discussed, one of the things we discussed was the bids for the real property that the town has offered under its foreclosure actions, and I would entertain a motion as to how to dispense with those bids.
I move that we notify the highest bidders for each of the three properties that they are the successful bidder, and Tom will notify them that they have 30 days to exercise their claim and to pay the town the amount that they have bid.
I think you should probably list the
I was
highest bid
gonna-
amounts.
You want me to
Yeah.
list who they are?
Yeah.
The properties that were bid on was High Ledge Olive Properties. The bidder was Ruth and Alan Watts, and they won the bid. Do you want me to make the amount? For
Yep.
$25,000. 36 Fullerton Street. The successful bidder was Diana Casey, who bid $31,000. The third property was 182 Lobster Cove Road. The successful bidder was Douglas Carter, who bid $41,600.
There's been a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. That moves us now to warrants.
I move that we approve the warrants upon their review.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the warrants upon review. Any discussion? That was quick. All in favor? It's unanimous. And lastly,
Move your turn.
second, there can be no discussion. All in
Indeed,
favor?
there can be.
We are adjourned. Thank you all.
We'll get a print.